Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and on this episode, we're going to be talking with Jaime Williams. Jaime is a sex and relationship counselor. She's also an alumni on faculty at the Somatica Institute in Berkeley, California. She mentors other students in the field of sexuality and sensuality, and she's been working to co-create healing with individuals, couples, throuples, and groups in her counseling practice since 2014. Welcome, Jaime. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I feel honored to be here.
Yes, well, I am glad to have you. Somatica is something that I know. I've mentioned it to a few of my friends, and when I do, they're like, huh? They don't understand it, or they don't know what it is. And so I'm hoping that with this show, we're going to educate the listeners and help them to understand what you do and how this type of work might be beneficial for them as individuals, or, if there's a couple out there listening, maybe there's a couple that would like to connect on an even deeper level and could use your help. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. All right. So I've introduced you a little bit. I've told the audience a little bit about you, but I really want to help them to understand your work a little bit more. So can you share exactly what you do with individuals and couples and groups?
Yes. This work in particular is modeled around the philosophy of working in the realm of vulnerability, mindfulness, and compassion, and moving through the dynamics of relationship, intimacy, embodiment, sensuality, supported by mindfulness, vulnerability, and compassion. That sounds like a lot of words, and how it shows up in a session is basically getting into a dynamic of recognizing that everything that we do in a session with me as a practitioner, with either an individual, a couple, or a group, I am working directly with what's happening in that moment in relationship to myself and the client. So I don't separate myself out in the equation. I am moving through territory in intimacy right along with the people that I work next to. So for instance, if I'm working with an individual who's in this courageous territory of being single, we're exploring in relationship to one another what it might be like to be more vulnerable, be more specific about what it is they are wanting and what's in the way of being able to articulate, express, communicate what they want with potential partners. Or I might be working with a couple and they might be having a difficult time expressing what it is that really turns them on. And I will help them learn new ways to more authentically state what's in the way of communicating more clearly, not just verbally, but I might get down on the ground with them and workshop some of their turn-ons. All in Somatica, it's always clothing on, but I'm working directly, experientially with what is up right there in the relationship and what's in the way of authentic connection.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to really dive into this more.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give some examples because
Okay, great.
in my preparation for talking with you, I of course did my research. I'm
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to give an example so that the audience can understand more. So, say for instance, I noticed a gentleman who perhaps he grew up in an environment where it was always pointed out what he was doing wrong, for example.
Yeah.
So he just, it seemed from the video that he was very hesitant about every step or every move that he made, and so
Yeah.
it even catapulted into his love relationships. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
when he's in a sexual position or anything, not literally position, but when he's with a partner, right? And so he's trying
Yes.
to get comfortable with maybe making a move with the partner or getting closer or connecting more, but because
Mm-hmm.
he was always raised in an environment where he felt like, he was always on eggshells and kind of would step on something and then somebody would, come down on him about how he did something wrong,
Mhm.
That carried on into his adulthood, into his relationships. And so he was afraid of making mistakes. He was very afraid. And
Mhm.
so how would you work with this individual? I mean, I saw, some examples, but I want you to share with the audience, if that was somebody that was coming to you and they're trying to get comfortable and be more
Mhm.
mindful and, you know,
Mhm.
explore and
It's a
connect.
great it's a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Well, so it's such a common dynamic in relationship where whether it's critique in the current relationship where potentially tone um, or attitude, behavior is affecting a partnership because of feeling rejected or feeling like they can't get it right,
Right.
or childhood in and of itself has impacted the current relationship, even if those aren't ways in which the relationship is behaving in the current moment. One of the ways in which I work with those kinds of dynamics from a familial standpoint is I'll do some work specifically. Say, let's use a man as an example.
Yeah.
We might journey back to particular memories where maybe a father or a mother was highly critical, and we might bring into that memory an ally that might help us find what it is that was really missing or needed some deep care in order to understand in current relationships what it is that is necessary. It might mean some affirmation. It might mean potentially the nervous system of this particular man needs to just be held. I might spend a whole session holding a person who has had an intense experience of rejection repetitively so that their nervous system, their body, their being can come into a calm space
Right.
before they even approach intimacy. And so a lot of what I do is oftentimes when people conceptualize what being a sex and relationship counselor is, they're thinking, I'm teaching sexual positions or I'm talking about specific sex toys. All of that is, part of the menu, but a deeper part of the menu is actually looking at what's in the way of intimacy because things like rejection, things like experiences of being made smaller when all you want to do is to feel fully embodied. Those kinds of things need to be approached in session prior to even having a fulfilling, authentic, exciting, passionate sex life. So that's just one example of what it might look like.
Yeah.
Another example might be extremely pleasurable, not as rooted in grief or rejection. It might be that I would help someone learn how to become more embodied in their erotic energy, less apologetic for
Yes.
desire.
Yes.
And that can look like all kinds of things, and we can get more specific there. But does that help in terms of some of the specifics?
It does. And so now I want to go deeper already. We
Mm-hmm.
just started this and I'm really digging deep. So
Yeah.
so as I'm listening to you talk about that second example of the
Mm-hmm.
person who is trying to learn how to be more present, to sort of let go and to be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, more, just kind of loosen up and they want passion in a relationship. They want passion in their sexual
Yes.
experiences or whatever, but maybe they just don't know how to loosen up and to have that. And so you can maybe get down on the floor with them and
Mm-hmm.
really help them with that. So can you kind of take me there? Give an
I
example of how
will.
that works. Yeah.
Yeah, let me speak specifically about partnership in that paradigm because I might be working with a partnership where they've been together say for 20 years,
Yeah.
and there are certain patterns that are set in motion. The passion has receded.
Yes.
There's a level of comfort, but it's kind of a very low pilot light on arousal. There's not a high flame, and the relationship potentially has gotten very heady without a lot of diverse experiences. The spontaneity is lacking. One of
Yes.
the things that I love working through with couples is learning how to drop into out of the mind and into the body. And that's specific as, basically teaching or coaching your partner on the different kinds of touch you like, even if you think they know
Mhm.
what it is you like. I might teach a couple to show how to lightly touch with fingertips or how to touch with more presence with a full hand, and then drop from that touch into noticing not how it is to touch your partner, but how to experience what it feels like touching your partner. It's hard to describe that verbally, but what I notice from a visual standpoint is when someone drops out of looking for cues on whether their partner likes or does not like what they're doing and drops into the sensation of experiencing the touch they're giving, it creates a whole different quality of connection. We drop out of our head and into our bodies in this way that even after being together for 20 years creates new pathways for intimacy to flare up, to heighten, to actually activate a new kind of passion. So that's one example of how I move through that.
I want to follow up on that because, first off, when I hear of couples like this, it just hurts my heart so much. And because I do know that there are couples out there that, could be experiencing this. Like it's just kind of grown cold. Like they're just two people living in a home together, kind of like roommates anymore. And they just don't have that passion. I mean, they love each other dearly, but they just don't really, they're not into it anymore. And so, it just hurts my heart to hear this. But I'm glad that you work with couples on this. And one thing that I've noticed just in my research is that blindfolding or closing their eyes can help with this. Why is that? Because I did notice, in some of the research and videos that I watched, the sex and relationship counselor having the person close their eyes, which created a more intense, passionate moment. So can you talk about how important that is in helping with, getting people out of their head or the mindfulness piece?
It's really profound because the simplest little shifts can actually provoke such a deep realm in terms of possibilities. So, for instance, taking away sight, even sort of the taboo of blindfold in and of itself is a little saucy and exciting. But in particular, when someone is sidetracked by actually tracking whether or not their partner is pleased, it can actually help by blindfolding. You're actually in a whole new universe. You can't see whether your partner is pleased or not. You actually have to become more attuned in the body. So blindfolding is one option. I mean, all the way down to whispering in your partner's ears, a partner you've had for 15, 20 years, what you would like to do to them without even touching them can ignite a new possibility for a deeper connection in terms of intimacy, passion, sensuality, romance. So there's tiny tweaks that can happen that actually, including things that aren't don't seem as linked to heightening intimacy, repair conversations, meaning cleaning up the debris that's in the way of authentic connection, learning how to have a really attentive repair conversation is one of the deepest pathways toward heightening intimacy, I would say. And that's always a surprise to couples, but it is so normal in my workspace to experience that the thing that's in the way of intimacy is things that actually haven't been cleaned up in the realm of relational connection.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really good. Now, I'd like to, you mentioned vulnerability, right? And how important this is to your work and what you do. And I would imagine that there are probably people who, maybe they have a difficult time really getting vulnerable or really, opening up and allowing that part of them to show. So how do you get people comfortable enough to be honest about their vulnerabilities or just kind of be vulnerable in and of itself?
Yeah, there's different layers to that. I would say specifically, oftentimes, and I would say from a gendered perspective, it's more common in the realm of an upbringing as a man, that men aren't given as much permission to actually share from feelings. I think that's changing, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm raising a son who's learning how to express his feelings. But men weren't actually given permission or acknowledged for the positive aspect of expressing what they were feeling. So oftentimes what I'm doing is expanding the menu again, giving almost a printout of emotional feelings and sensations so that people, all genders, are able to start articulating what's happening for them, sensation, emotion, and experience. So that is one way in which I enhance vulnerability. Another way is I do not keep my life out of the room. I don't share about my life in the room in service to myself. I share about my life in the room in service to the client or clients that I'm working with. But I am on this path right along with my clients. And so my ability to stay clear and attuned to my own vulnerabilities, my own experience of relationship is very helpful in the realm of vulnerability in my sessions. So I'll share things that I'm moving through, ways in which I have had to normalize some of the things I've gone through, or some of my experiences and sensations that keep me from having the kind of authentic connections I'd like.
Okay. All right. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, honesty is a huge part of this. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you how many shows that I've had that usually communication, honesty, being
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate what you want, very honestly, is talked about. But interestingly enough, is something that many people find it very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd like you to tell, why do people feel, why is it so hard for people to do, and then share how important it is in your work and what you do.
Yeah, I would say there's so many things that impact our ability to be honest. And one of the huge parts of this work is undermining shame. And shame comes into relationship on all levels. When we were children, many of us experienced shame for desire, for sexual desire. Potentially were caught doing something and shamed from the start. That's impacted many of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Or have felt shame in past relationships for desires that are very normal and natural, but have been then perceived as abnormal or unnatural. And so a lot of the work that I get to do with clients is bringing some of the things that are in the sort of shadows of limited self-expression due to shame and honesty about those things. Part of that is when I build connection with the clients that I have the honor to work with, I create really a deep understanding of how normal all desires are. Most of
Okay.
the time when I'm hearing just the beginning pieces of what someone is wanting and afraid to ask, I have this lovely moment where I get to celebrate how normal, how natural, and how exciting those desires are in the realm of connection. So I normalize fantasies or desires that many people feel ashamed about,
Okay.
and they're confusing. I work with many women in particular who have rape fantasies, or individuals who get excited by dominance or submission, and that feels complicated in the world of feminism and embodied, liberated, non-dominating environments, or fantasies or desires that feel complicated in terms of where they might have been born. So a lot of what happens is I create more space for sharing those things that potentially people have been afraid to talk about. And once those things start to come out, then we can explore potentially where they were born from and why cultivating a deeper understanding of what's really going on there can be so beneficial, not only to pleasure, but to healing.
Wow. Wow. Man,
Mm-hmm.
you have just unloaded. There's a lot that you packed in there. So
Yeah.
we've got to unpack that. But one thing before we start to talk about fantasies and desires,
Mm-hmm.
you always kind of talk about the rationale behind, or the reason why. And I can imagine there's probably people who are listening and they're like, well, why is that so important? Like, why do we have to like pinpoint why? But there is a
Mm-hmm.
reason. I mean, and so can you
Mm-hmm.
kind of share why it is important to understand the sort of pathology of some of this, where some of these
Mm-hmm.
feelings are coming from, before we get into fantasies and desires? Why is it important for you and your work to help the client or the patient to understand the why?
Mhm.
Or,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, here's the thing, actually, is it's not as important to understand it, because I think sometimes that brings us up into the head rather than, to try and it takes us away from the experience of pleasure.
Okay.
But when we can actually move through the turn on to potentially the places, the wounded areas or the missing resources that potentially informed or created some of those desires, then in this kind of magical, non-analytical way, healing happens.
Ah,
It's exciting when we can understand it, but it's not essential to healing. What's essential, I think, to healing is being able to access what it is that you're really looking for. I think that that's where things get misunderstood. So, for instance,
yeah.
it might be that someone really just wants to be taken, and they perceive that what they want is to feel taken and desired. But ultimately, when we do a little more looking, they don't just want to feel taken and desired, they want to feel cherished.
Hmm.
And potentially, when we look even deeper, feeling cherished is something they may not have had for a very long time. And that is the one piece of that turn on that can bring a deep amount of healing.
Right.
Sometimes we find that from the turn on looking backwards. Sometimes we find the wounds and move forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Mhm.
And I would imagine that once, if you get to it and you figure out that they just want to feel cherished, if
Mhm.
the partner figures that out and is able
Mhm.
to show that or do that, wow, I am
Mhm.
thinking that the potential of that relationship or that experience is going to be through the roof.
Absolutely.
Y-
Absolutely. Like I have these moments in sessions where potentially a partnership that's been together for a long time, they've been trying to express something like, I just want you to see me. I want
mm,
to feel really seen in our sexual connections and our sensual connections. But it isn't until the partner actually witnesses the places that in childhood their beloved did not feel seen.
mm,
It's not until they really get a glimpse of that through some really deep work that they understand actually how they get to be a part of the orchestration of their healing. It's not that they are going to look at their partner as if they are their father or their mother, where they may not have felt cherished or seen, but they can have a glimpse of the tenderness that's behind that, and so then see or cherish their partner in a way that feels really nourishing and satiating.
yeah.
And it's the surprising piece of this work is always that when I witness partners in particular be able to step outside of what they're not doing right
Hmm.
into the possibility of staying curious and then through deep connection doing something so precisely um, perfect out of just being present.
Hmm.
It's just this incredible experience to witness as a practitioner. Like I feel
Yeah.
like this honoring that occurs as I experience partners really get the depth of this.
Wow. I bet that's really
Mm-hmm.
neat. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
let's go into the fantasies and desires,
Mm-hmm.
because you mentioned that a little bit ago.
Yes.
You mentioned the person wants to be dominated, or
Yeah.
so how is it that you are able to get couples,
Mm-hmm.
individuals, throuples,
Mm-hmm.
groups to
Mm-hmm.
share their fantasies or desires with
Mm-hmm.
somebody else? Because it might be that they're afraid because they feel like I'm afraid to say this because it sounds really weird or sounds crazy. how
Yeah.
do how do you get them to actually share their fantasies and desires, and can you give some examples of some fantasies and desires that people
Yeah.
will tend to have? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, actually, let me start with that first,
Yeah.
and then I want to, in case I forget,
Yeah.
remind me. I create some ground rules in terms of sharing fantasies and desires because it's so important to establish safe communication in the realm of sexual and sensual self-expression. But one of the ways I help people identify and clarify and communicate their fantasies and desires is by giving some ideas of some of the genres of turn-ons. And so I'll just do a quick glimpse at those. And basically, when I'm working with individuals, when I'm working with couples, when I'm working with groups, just noticing, like, do I fit in this category or this? Do I fit in all of these categories, or a little bit of one and a little bit of another? So people have fantasies in the realm of romance, feeling, wanting to be seen, known, loved. There's a lot of, there's so much that Hollywood does in support of romance. So there's the romantic side, wanting love letters, wanting acts of grand gestures, and then there's passion.
Yeah.
Passion is more, rather than I see you, I know you, is more about I want you. It's immediate. It's primal. It's got a quality of not caring what anyone else thinks, but needing to have. There's spiritual turn-ons, which are more about being one with each other, being one with the universe, feeling the expansive nature of connection beyond the body. There's sensual, which is more about all of the senses. Maybe that some of those turn-ons are outside in the elements, eyes closed, sensation play. And then I specifically put dominance and submission in its own category because it's set apart from kink and fetishes because it has a quality of dominance, being not wanting to overpower, but to experience a level of control that feels powerful. And submission is more about being able to let go of being in control. Oftentimes, people who feel turned on by submitting may actually exert a ton of control in their daily lives. And so feeling like they want to submit is a way to actually have a breather from the level of control they experience in their lives. And then there's all kinds of territory in the realm of kink and fetishes. And I won't go into details there, but I specify those with the people that I'm working with so that they can just notice. I almost say, and I hope it's okay to say online, a pussy meter or a cock meter when you feel this kind of like, yes, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
It's this little yes or no in terms of arousal. I feel drawn to that genre. So a lot of what I do is help people clarify and own and normalize each of those turn-ons. And when I get sort of some clarity with individuals or couples or groups around what it is that's turning them on, what genre they might be a part of, then I create these ground rules, which are, the first is no obligation, meaning if I share something with you, if I share a turn on, a fantasy, a desire, it's not that I want it to happen necessarily in the world of forms, in our relationship out there in the world. It's that it turns me on. Okay. And I am sharing it with you because I want you to know something deep about me. And no obligation in sharing it that you have to do that thing with me.
Okay.
So no obligation is the first part that creates this really a safe platform for sharing. And then the second ground rule is no judgment. And that doesn't mean that you might not judge me or the things that I tell you that turn me on, but that you, in the time in which I'm sharing it, you just track your judgments and then spend some time working out what those judgments are with someone else until you can come back to me with clarity and ownership in a way that can bring us closer rather than further away. And those two are so important to me in the realm of sharing or expanding the possibility of sharing your turn-ons with your beloved or beloved.
Yeah. So what tends to happen? You've talked about your guidelines. What happens, for example, if when a person shares their turn-ons, they are not the same for the other person? I know that you've said no obligation and that. So how do you make room for that, or
Yeah, it's such a common experience to me in working in partnership for couples to have divergent desires, meaning that my turn on may be very different than a partner's turn on. In fact, not even in the same realm. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, part of what I do. One is I help people learn how to deal with disappointment. That disappointment is a normal part of relationship, that you might feel a level of disappointment in regard to your partner's turn-ons or in regards to their response to your turn-ons
Mm-hmm.
is an opportunity to grow closer to one another. But I also actually help partners clarify what it is they're really looking for in those turn-ons. So for instance, if I'm working with a partner who's afraid of their partner, their beloved's desire to dominate them, they don't want to be dominated. We
Okay.
might look at what it is that their beloved is really going for in the experience of being someone who dominates. It may be that they just want to feel a little more saucy, a little more in control. And are there ways to navigate understanding what's behind that in order to create more connection? Or it may be that the partner does not want to be dominated at all, and they want to find ways to honestly outsource that. And what I mean by that is create agreements where if those turn-ons are not something that can be had in the relationship, can they create agreements where those kinds of desires can be fulfilled outside of the relationship? That's complicated
Hmm.
territory, but it
Okay.
is honest territory in the realm of this work.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find that, couples come to those types of agreements, and how does that work out? And let me make sure that I'm
Yes.
understanding. So,
Yes.
yeah, let me make sure I'm understanding. So, what you're saying is maybe you got a couple.
Mm-hmm.
This person is not willing to do this dominant turn on with the person, but
Mm-hmm.
you said that, I think from what I'm hearing, they could have an agreement that
Mm-hmm.
if it can't get it from you, then I will get it from someone else, and you're okay with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, that's one of the approaches. I mean, ultimately, most of the couples that come to me when there's been divergent desires, potentially there's been a dishonest outsourcing, meaning cheating,
Okay. Oh.
has occurred. And, for me, in that, it's an interesting because I bring my life into this work. My work began years before I knew this is what I was going to do. I was healing from my own experience of betrayal in
Okay.
relationships.
Okay.
And so, the cost of that is great, whether it's creating an agreement so that you can have something that you can't have in the relationship from an honest standpoint, or having to deal with the debris of potentially getting something outside of a partnership that you're being dishonest about,
Okay.
or settling for the fact that maybe you just won't have that in this relationship and you find new ways to feel pleasure.
Okay.
Those are the territories I navigate. Sometimes, very often, people don't want to create agreements outside of relationships and they don't want to cheat.
Okay.
And so what I do is work with couples to find a path towards pleasure
Okay.
that is satisfying and fulfilling in the relationship. Or the next step is potentially this relationship is not the one that couples can stay in, and so I do conscious uncoupling as well. And I think every bit of direction that you go in that realm in regards to divergent desires, each one of those has its complicated and difficult parts. And one of the beauties of working with partners through that territory is that they get to do it in support with someone who's actually recognizing that there isn't just one way to look at it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So on the flip side, when we were talking about dominance,
Yeah.
maybe, and you talked about how this partner might just want to feel, powerful, feel in control or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a flip side to this. So maybe there's someone who wants to feel submissive, or
Yeah.
the exact opposite. So how does that look like, and how does that play out? And can you
Mm-hmm.
give an example? Yeah.
Yes, I'd say the simplest sort of version of that is the relief that a partner might feel in being tied up, of having sex or sensual experiences where their hands and feet are potentially tied in a safe way with safe agreements.
Okay.
Um, and one of the things I experience with couples who choose to explore this is that there's something about not having to make any decisions in that realm, but also being taken, having a yes to desire without having to um, fully. It's almost like being. If I were to imagine
Okay.
saying to a partner, "I want you just to take me. I want you to take me up against the wall," which is a form of being controlled on some level.
Okay.
It may be that I have a lot of desire to experience primal passion, but I don't know fully how to ask for it. I want to be consumed by that direct impact of someone taking me, or I
Hmm.
want to actually be tied up in a way that it's not me who's choosing the direction of where desire goes, but it is me who is absolutely wanting that desire to come towards me.
Hmm.
So those are some of the things that happen for people who want to actually be have submission be a part of that have submission as part of their turn on. Is there's a level at which desire happens in this palpable way without actually having to be the one driving it.
Ah. Okay.
And that can be very healing and definitely satisfying. That's definitely satisfying for a lot of people.
Awesome. Okay. All right.
Hmm.
Well, good. So I want to move now
Hmm.
into mindfulness. I'm hearing a lot about
Hmm.
this lately on so many different levels. I mean, mindfulness at
Yeah.
work and mindfulness. I mean, people are talking about it everywhere. So,
Yes.
can you describe, first of all, for our audience, maybe people haven't heard of it, what mindfulness is? And then how do you help people to be more mindful in their experiences, while they're working with you?
Yeah, I love that you brought it into the realm of not just sensuality or sexuality. Mindfulness. It's funny. I love word searches, but mindfulness. The definition is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one on the dictionary response. And mindfulness, sensually and sexually, is really present. It's really, and it's difficult to be present. There's so much that actually distracts us from
Yeah.
presence in our lives across the board.
Right.
But mindfulness, um, sexually and sensually, on one level, is about dropping into the body, sensation, emotion, experience. What sensations am I experiencing? Is my body tight, loose, liberated? Am I contracted? Do I feel a level of growing closer to someone or further away? Those sensations, emotions, is there sadness, joy, pleasure? Really looking inward to notice what's happening in the body,
Mm-hmm.
even locationally, like noticing what's really going on, because sometimes we just move through getting through life. And so mindfulness sensually and sexually is extremely pleasurable, first of all.
Right.
Sometimes difficult, because oftentimes when we're being mindful, vulnerable, connected in relationships, some difficult emotions, sensations arise. So mindfulness in the realm of sensuality and sexuality brings to mind also boundaries. Being mindful in our sensual and sexual experiences, we start to notice, are we bypassing boundaries? Are we enduring rather than experiencing? This is more common, I would say, for women from a gendered perspective than men, because we've, at least in my societal or cultural upbringing, I learned to accommodate.
Mm-hmm.
And so mindfulness allows us to actually notice those places where we aren't even sure what we want or what we don't want.
Okay.
And so when we start to become mindful of emotion, sensation, experience, we start to access this really yummy place of understanding, wait, do I want this? How do I want to engage in this? Can I slow everything down so I don't miss what it is I want or don't want in this experience. And one of the things that helps me in the realm of mindfulness is setting up some really clear agreements around experimentation sexually or sensually, whether you're in a new partnership or a partnership that's been around for a while. Experiencing words, safe words is what they're commonly known as, but not just for sensation play, but for slowing everything down. It may be that you're not quite sure what you want, and so you say yellow, which is pause, slow it down. Am I being mindful in this connection? Is this going the direction I want to go? And then continue on. Or red, stop. I need to slow down. Something's hurting or not going the way I want it to go. Mindfulness also allows, I think, partners to start tracking. There's oftentimes sexual trauma in people's history. And so we might go into a fight, flight, or freeze if we're having an experience. And what that could look like is silence. Someone's checked out because they potentially are in a freeze. So when we're mindful lovers, we're actually tracking on some level, are we attuned to with our partners right here? And then we get to be in this territory of deep connection through sensuality and sexuality.
Okay.
So you can actually correlate that to so many parts of life, but in the realm of sensation and the realm of sexual connection and sensuality, it's really a great playground to develop the skill of mindfulness for our entire lives.
Awesome. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get people, I would imagine, because it can be kind of difficult, like you said, some other kinds of things can come up, or we're just distracted anyway, a lot of times in our lives. So
right.
training yourself to be present and be where you are and to focus on what is actually happening and not let other things creep in your mind.
Yeah.
You know
right.
what I mean? So, for example, I've spoken to, and I mentioned this on other shows, friends of mine that talk about, their bodies. So they're thinking about how they're being looked at. What's my body looking like? Is my belly sticking out, or whatever. And so all of these things they're thinking about, and they're not necessarily in the moment or being present with what is actually happening because they're thinking about all this other stuff. So training yourself to not think about how you're being perceived and to be where you are enjoying or feeling what you're supposed to be feeling at the time. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, really, I have so much compassion and connection and experience with actually that, that territory where we sort of pretend we're present.
Yeah.
But our minds are potentially going to insecurities or stepping out because we're wondering what our beloved is thinking. And I work with a handful of people with body dysmorphia, with aspects of self-harm, with histories of anorexia or bulimia. And, that's its own. I really collaborate with other practitioners who specialize in those particular areas. But I would say mostly bring just a level of compassion and curiosity to those dynamics. I would say from a tool perspective, from a perspective of one of the pathways that I use to help people drop more into their bodies, I would circle back around to the dynamic of not just focusing on how your beloved is touching you, or if you are touching your beloved in a correct or satisfying way, but to drop into what part of your body is touching their part of body and what it feels like to activate that sensation in your own body. Meaning, for instance, maybe your thigh is brushing their hip. And what does your thigh get to feel as it brushes their hip? I drop into one point of contact. And that is a sure, direct shortcut to dropping from the mind into the body, is really focusing on the point of contact, on several points of contact, on what it feels like to touch the part of the body in you that is touching the part of the body in them.
Oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. I tell you.
It's pretty great. Yeah.
And once I would think once you are really able to train yourself to be able to do that, amazing. You talk about
Amazing.
you talk about the
Yeah.
4th of July and fireworks. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And just, like it is amazing and it's so normal for our minds to wander, like to have
Mm.
I think that a lot of what I experience in my sessions is how hard we are on ourselves.
Mhm.
I certainly am, and on
Yes.
hard on myself.
Yeah.
And so really, there's this saying often, we have to, before we can, that we have to love ourselves before we can love another. But often, many people don't know how to love themselves. They were not taught how to do that.
Yeah.
They were potentially loved uh, in a way that just missed the mark. And so, a lot of what I work with people is when you are experiencing someone loving you, genuinely loving you, or you're experiencing deep love for another, imagine bringing that love to yourself. We don't know how to do that. I think that's one of the myths I get to break often in this work is there's no one way,
Yeah.
first of all, to love, and we shouldn't know how. It's all an experiment. We actually are in this not as if we should know. And so as we're moving through the realm of sensuality and sexuality, to be generously compassionate on ourselves in the process of learning, of experimenting, and growing closer to a deeper, authentic voice of self expression, a deeper, authentic connection with our beloveds, to just have a generous amount of compassion.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're about to wrap up, but before we do, I want to talk about because you actually do a lot of exercises with couples and individuals um, in your sessions. Like when I say exercises, like you actually show them, what to do or give them tips
Yes.
on what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
what I want to hear is, and I want listeners to understand, maybe some take home tips to enhance their intimacy with their partner or
Yeah,
with their
that's
because
great.
we talked
I,
about earlier how couples can be disconnected and oh my god they've been married for 20 and
yeah,
30 years and now they kind of live like roommates and they love each other but they're just not really connected. So what are some
uh-huh.
tips to
I
enhance?
would
Yeah.
say the biggest tip that is actually a ton of fun is very simple. It's curiosity. It's
Yeah.
it's literally experiencing your partner as if you don't know them. It's noticing what's in the way of that. I think that we get our egos get a bad rap. I think egos are there to, there's a way in which we notice how our ego can be in service to us, but not be driven or run by our ego. And oftentimes, we want to perceive that we know what our partner wants, but for the most part, in my experience, even for really beautifully close couples, there are things they don't know about each other,
Mm.
and we are always changing. And so it might be that staying curious, like as if you don't know how your partner wants to be touched, you have them show you how they want to be touched. Show you on their arms, on their legs, on their collarbones, on their face. They want light touch. How specifically light? Um, find out more specifically, like, do you like it when I say I want you, or would you rather me say I love you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what do you when you want me to say, I think you're hot? Do you want me to say it in a whisper, or do you want me to say it in a, like learn what it is your partner is really looking for? So awakening curiosity, which is a scary tool,
Mm-hmm.
because on some level it's admitting that we actually have so much to learn.
Right.
But it's really, I think, one of the most yummy tools that I get to work with couples in particular. And, if you're single, then you got that one down because you're starting from the start with curiosity. But there's a level of curiosity that needs to be invited even in the realm of singlehood, because I think we come towards new potential partnerships trying to show that we know.
Yeah.
But if we could get into a place of willingly stating, hey, there's so little I know about you, and
Right.
I want to know you. So curiosity is probably one of the biggest tools. And in the same way, a willingness to repair things maybe we've missed. I'd
Yeah.
say that's another tool.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of incredible tools too, like go into your kitchen and find things like those, paintbrush basters and then feather dusters, and there's all kinds of sensation play tools you can gather and surprise your partner with. But I'd say the tools that I work the most with are around curiosity, willingness, and courage. Yeah.
Awesome. Because I before we wrap up, I'm just thinking about the fact that on other shows I've talked about the fact that oftentimes it's difficult for people to actually show.
Yes.
Because they are embarrassed to show because maybe they don't want to like or direct or say what they like and what they don't like because maybe they're afraid that it comes off negative for the other person.
Yeah.
And so we just don't really know how to show or how to lead, and because we feel it's wrong. But
I really point out, like, I love how you just said that. It's a perfect lead in to how you might show a lover or make room for more communication, Tina, because you just said it perfectly. It's like, hey, I perceive I might come across like I know, but I don't know. And I do feel nervous about showing, but I want to show. Like the way that you just said that was just so tender and vulnerable and caused me to come closer to you.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd say that is a perfect way to actually start showing.
All right. Well, see
Yeah.
there? See?
You
Anybody
cut
listening
that
out
down.
there? That's right. Anybody listening out there? See, I just showed you how to do it. So now,
Yeah,
there you go.
did.
Yeah. All right. So, so how is it that people can hear more about Somatica? Maybe hear more about your practice, what you do, because you have clients in California that you actually see. Well, probably not right now because of the pandemic, but and you're starting to get more into virtual sessions and all of that. So. How can they follow you maybe on social media? How can they hear more about your practice? How can they, maybe if there's articles you've written or different things, how can they hear more? Yeah.
Thank you. My website is desireintimacylove.com. You can find me there. I have on Instagram, I am Jaime Williams .intimacy coach, and it's JAIME Williams .intimacy coach. Let's see. Those are the two best ways to find me. I also have Facebook, Desire Intimacy Love on Facebook. And I do a lot, of course, all of my sessions are online right now. And so I do work with people all over the world. And reach my way. And to find out more information about the training, which I highly recommend, is the Somatica Institute. That's where I was trained as a certified Somatica method practitioner. And they are lovely, incredible, articulate, and wise teachers. But reach my way through desireintimacylove.com.
All right. Well, I tell you, I've enjoyed talking with you. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's been nice spending time with you.
Yeah, I'm just on the tip, just on the edge of my seat, just listening, and so it's good. And I hope that there are people out there that have enjoyed listening and have learned something, and maybe we've inspired them and they want to learn more because they want to get more connected and more passionate and share those desires and turn-ons with their partner or their spouse. So
it can change the world, I'll tell you.
I'm telling you.
All right. You take care.
All right. Thanks so much, Jaime. And thank you guys for listening. There's just something I want to share with you guys before we go. So if you are enjoying this, you have to help me by subscribing. You have to leave a comment or rate or let me know that you like the show. I mean, this is going to help me to know the types of topics that you're interested in. And who knows, it might just keep me around for a little longer. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I, of course, is your host, Tina Love. And until next time, peace. And don't you forget,